And basically, to just become a data analyst, you need three skills. One is, like you said, Microsoft Excel. That's still one of the biggest things in the analytics world. Being able to analyze data within Excel is definitely a top tier skill that you could have. I definitely think AI will play a role in data analytics in the future. And there's the development of some really cool AI data tools are in the works, that's for sure. But I see it less as eliminatory and more as like aid.
All right, welcome to this episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. And today we're going to be talking about careers in data, how to break into data, what are the type of career paths, and what can you expect. And what I'm excited about talking about this topic is because it's growing, and it's not just technology companies that are using data or data scientists to be able to grow their businesses. It's every single industry out there needs data and organizing the data to make better decisions, to know where to invest their capital, their time, their resources, and so on. And to talk about this important industry and topic, I actually have Avery Smith. Avery Smith is not only a data scientist, but he's a career coach, has an amazing company called Data Career Jumpstart, and has the #1 podcast on this particular topic on Spotify. So Avery, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here and be talking about how to land a data job.
Love it, man. So what got you involved in this industry? I see from your profile that you've been a data scientist in many companies and now are helping others break into this amazing industry.
Yeah, so I didn't study like computer science or statistics in college. I studied chemical engineering, but I quickly realized, man, I don't actually like being a chemical engineer. And I realized I wanted to do something that I actually enjoyed a little bit more, but also gave me a little bit more flexibility in my life as well. Because as a chemical engineer, you can't really work from home. You have to like only like live in Texas or Louisiana for oil, for example. And I was like, oh crap, I don't know if I want that. And so I really liked to program, I really liked math. And so I discovered data analytics. And I was like, man, this is the job for me. It's really fun because you get to kind of be like a detective going through data, trying to find, looking at the clues to try to figure out the whole story of what's going on in your business or your data set.
From your experiences, do you need do you even need a 4-year degree to get into data, or like, what are you noticing? Like, what does it take to start or get or break into data?
Yeah, it's really interesting because previously there wasn't very many data roles. Like we look back a decade ago, and data was just kind of kicking off. So things are changing pretty rapidly. And when I was breaking into the field to become a data scientist, it was like you had to have a PhD. Like that was pretty much the only way. But now there's a lot more roles, and it's a lot easier. The barriers are a lot less high. A 4-year degree is typically quote unquote required. It's definitely helpful to have a 4-year degree, honestly, in anything. But there are lots of people who have been able to land a data job without some sort of a degree, or maybe with just an associate's degree. It's possible, but it's a little helpful to have some sort of a 4-year degree.
So what would you say is the common track of somebody that maybe graduated with a degree? Maybe they have a lot of analytics in it, right? Maybe they learn some basic Excel. But what would you say are the required hard skills that are required to get level entry roles in data?
Yeah, well, if you look at like entry level roles in data, there's quite a few. The most common one would probably be a data analyst, or it would fall underneath that kind of category. And basically, to just become a data analyst, you need three skills. One is, like you said, Microsoft Excel. That's still one of the biggest things in the analytics world. Being able to analyze data within Excel is definitely a top tier skill that you could have. The second one is one called SQL or SQL. That stands for Structured Query Language. It's like a programming language, but it's a very light one. It's not too difficult. And really, you can get started with about 13 to 20 commands, and be pretty proficient in it. And that basically helps you analyze bigger data sets a little bit faster. Excel can't handle very big data very well, to be honest. And so that's when you want to use SQL. And then the last one is some sort of, they call it a BI tool, a business intelligence tool. And the two most popular ones are Tableau or Power BI. And this is usually for data visualization, creating charts or dashboards. actually trying to visualize your data. So if you can learn those three skills, or even if you can just learn one out of those three skills, that's usually enough to land your first data job and get started.
And what is the career progression? So what would be like kind of like the job title and then the compensation range for the first role? And then what would be like the second mid-level role? And then what do you see and you can expect towards the top tier of your career?
Yeah, data analytics is very well. First off, it's like you mentioned earlier, it's domain agnostic, meaning that like whether you're in oil manufacturing, like I was at ExxonMobil, or you're in tech, like you work for Apple or you work for Facebook or something like that, or even if you just work for like a supply chain, like no matter the industry, they're hiring data professionals, and the compensation is a little bit tied to what industry you're in. So it's kind of all over the place in terms of like salaries, but like typically in the United States, like the lowest salary you'd ever get paid as a data analyst is probably around 55,000, but the average is probably for entry level is probably much closer to like 72,000. And then in terms of like data salaries, it really could probably go up to around $500,000 on the higher end. So it is quite a big range that you could possibly aim for. But typically, in my opinion, this is a good career progression. You'd land an entry level data analyst role. You do that for maybe 2 to 3 years, and then you'll pop up. You'll get raises every year. Then you'll become more of like just a regular data analyst, or maybe even get a senior data analyst title. And as you're doing that, you're progressing probably anywhere between $15,000 to $30,000. Like a senior data analyst average salary is probably right at the six-figure mark. Um, but the cool thing is once you're a data analyst, you have these skills you're developing. You're getting paid to learn the rest of the skills. You could become a data scientist, which has a little bit of a higher salary floor and salary ceiling. So, like for instance, a typical average data scientist salary is probably closer to $115,000 a year. And data engineers is also another thing that you could potentially pivot to, and that has a higher salary too, probably average around the same $115,000 a year.
And you said that it depends on the industry. So what I've noticed, right, as we're working with our clients, right, we see is like the most profitable the industry is, like the bigger their margins, the more they're willing or able to pay for talent. So you generally see a lot of tech or finance or pharmaceuticals where there's high margin products. They're able to then translate that into higher pay to be able to attract better talent. So I'm assuming it's the same in data then.
Yeah, 100%. I think the higher salaries are going to be like those tech jobs, or those finance jobs. A lot of the FANG jobs, or whatever you want to call it, manga now. The Meta, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, all that good stuff. Google. Those are going to have some of the higher salaries. But like you said, financial industry, the tech industry, pharmaceutical industries, they can all have high paying data jobs as well. And I mean, and those are like the upper echelon, but like there's still plenty of high paying jobs in every industry. Those are just the top paying industries.
Yeah. Um, I'm going to make an assumption, and I would love to tell me if I can be completely off. The difference, the type of work that a data analyst is doing versus a data scientist is doing is the data analyst is doing more of the gathering and organizing the data, and the data scientist then able to more of interpret the data and then make decisions from it, or what makes it so different for what the job or role of a data analyst versus a data engineer versus a data scientist?
Yeah, it's super tricky, and the interesting thing is a lot of these titles are pretty new, so they're pretty fluid. And a lot of companies honestly just kind of name them whatever they feel like. But in my opinion, the correct definition is a data analyst and a data scientist are going to be focused on insight generation. So the idea of actually pulling value from your data and applying it back to the domain. A data engineer is more focused on, we call them the plumbers of like the data world. They're basically, how do you get data from this place to that place? How do you actually store the data? How do we make the data accessible to everyone very quickly? So they're more focused on like infrastructure and less about insights. And then the difference between a data analyst and a data scientist, because they are both working on insights, is there's four types of analytics: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. And a data analyst is typically going to focus on the descriptive and diagnostic, which basically means what happened and why. And a data scientist is going to focus more on the predictive and prescriptive, which is what will happen in the future and how can we make favorable outcomes based off of what we know. Like how can we make the future happen the way we want it to?
That's so interesting. It reminds me a lot of like when I talk a lot about. It's like, okay, what percent? If I like to break this down to an analogy, so like anybody listening can understand. What percent? If you think about it, you go into a McDonald's and the person that's in the cash register, what percent of their job are they following a standard operating procedure, and what percent of their job are they thinking outside the box and they're trying to create new procedures? And odds are, for a level entry job where you're making minimum wage, 80 plus, if not 90, or in that scenario, 99% is following the procedures as set, right? But what about the McDonald's CEO, which is on the other side of the spectrum? What percent of that CEO's time is following a standard operating procedure versus creating, strategizing, implementing, right? And it's completely flipped. So that's kind of why I was thinking about like that question in the data world. Are the data analysts more about following processes or where to get the data, putting together, organizing the data, and the data scientists is then more about flipping the script where they're actually now how to use the data, get prescribing and predicting?
Yeah, I definitely think there is some of that where as a data analyst, they're probably at least an entry level data analyst, you probably are following more of SOPs or maybe like what a mentor gives you or like a set like but I think a lot of the time in the data world, you're kind of told what they want to do and then you're kind of open you have the opportunity to go solve the problem however you see fit. So I definitely think there as a data analyst, you do have a little bit less creativity as a data scientist, but it's not that big of a gap at the end of the day. To be honest, a lot of there's a lot of room for creativity in all the data positions.
Amazing. So, all right, look, I'm listening to this podcast, Avery. Everything you're saying, this industry sounds amazing. I love, I'm analytical, but maybe don't never thought about it, building a career in data. But I'm really sparked my interest. What would be my next steps? How long do you think it would take me if I have some basic Excel skills to actually from the day that today I'm deciding this is what I want to do to realistically being able to get my first shot into this industry? What do you think? And what should be my next three moves?
Yeah, in terms of timeline, it really just depends on like how much work you're willing to put into it, right? Because if you are able to like work on it a lot or even full time, it's going to be faster. I typically tell the people that I coach and mentor that if you're starting from quote unquote scratch, like the fastest you could probably do it is like 70 days. Is probably about 10 weeks. There's just a little bit you have to learn in terms of the tech stack that takes you a little bit of time, like the SQL and the Tableau and stuff like that. So anywhere between, we're looking at like, I guess that's like 2.5 months to 6 months is probably realistic for a complete career switch. In terms of like the next thing, like to actually, you think you're interested, I would just like go through and think through this, like, what would you like to do and why do you think that you're interested in it? Like, I think first is number one, making sure you're actually interested in it, whether that's watching some YouTube videos, some day in the lives, stuff like that, to make sure like, okay, yes, this career is actually for me and I'm excited about it. And then two, it's to actually start learning the skills, because how to use Excel, how to use SQL, how to use Tableau to actually analyze data. And then number three, and this is the most important, I think most people miss this, is to start doing. It's easy to just kind of get in tutorial. I call it tutorial hell, where you're just like watching tutorial after tutorial after tutorial, and it feels like you're learning, but really most of the learning comes by doing and actually like hands-on learning. And so doing some sort of a project, even if it's a guided project where you're actually kind of going step by step, you're in the tools, actually learning the data with a real case scenario. It's not just like some made up little exercise. It's like a full fledged project from A to Z. I think that's really important to cement your learning.
Where would you suggest going and getting access to these types of projects or coming up with that data? Like if I'm saying, okay, like saying, hey, every great idea. I want to do the project, but I don't even know where to find this. Where can I get enough data to be able to do this? Where can I find some of this stuff?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the projects, it's there's not actually a ton of resources out there. So like for instance, on my YouTube channel, I actually did 30 data projects in 30 days. You guys can check out that. There's like a lot of places to learn. Data, like the skills like Data Camp and Maven Analytics are two of like the biggest, but not a lot of them focus on projects. And that's why in my boot camp, I make sure that it's entirely project based. So we actually do 10 plus projects in my boot camp. But one of the coolest resources that I think anyone who might be interested in any sort of data sets is actually kaggle.com, Kaggle. And what it is, well, it's a couple different things, but one of the coolest parts about it is it's actually like a data set repository, like a data set library. And so like you can go in there to their data sets and search anything like ice cream or catfish or I don't know, whatever you're interested in. And it'll spit out a bunch of different data sets. And you can just go to town on those and start analyzing those. So it's actually really fun to like go in there and find obscure topics to analyze.
What I love about this industry is like you can do it about anything. I I'm ashamed to say this, but I'm gonna admit it. I love watching trashy TV, and one of my favorite accounts to follow was called this account, and I love watching The Bachelor.
Oh, Bachelor data.
Yes, Bachelor Data. And the reason I say that is I think I like watching The Bachelor because I just been in such a stable relationship for over a decade. I just love to see other people's relationship drama. It's just fun. But I started enjoying the show more when I ran into the Instagram account Bachelor Data and how awesome that she just analyzed like the dress, the screen time, the diversity, like all of this to be able to predict stuff, and I thought it was genius. And it's so cool to have seen her being able to quit her job as a data scientist in corporate America to doing this full time.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. It just really goes to show that like there's so many different topics that you can analyze. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, Avery, as we wrap it up, I do have one question for you. How do you see? Because, like, to me, like, I'm seeing AI disrupt many industries, but I can also see how AI can disrupt the data. How do you see it from your point of view? AI disrupting this, and someone going into this. Do you think that it can be eliminated, or what do you think? Like bus drivers or truck drivers can be eliminated by autonomous driving. What do you think? What do you see?
Yeah, I definitely think AI will play a role in data analytics in the future. And there's the development of some really cool AI data tools are in the works, that's for sure. But I see it less as eliminatory and more as like aid. I think I can't remember the source, so this is not very believable, I guess, convincing. I'm pretty sure it's Harvard Business Review, but I could be wrong. But some like really big organization did a study on like what the top 10 jobs to be eliminated and the top 10 jobs that would actually be generated from generative AI. And data analysts were like third on the actually on like the increase list. And so I definitely think what it will do is it will lower the door to become a data analyst, because instead of having, to take, like I said, 7 to, I don't know, 25 weeks to learn SQL, you can kind of just say what you want into generative AI and it'll generate the SQL code for you. So there's definitely an opportunity where to use AI, I definitely think it will be a factor, but I see it more like, if we're like like house framers or construction workers, and in the past we've maybe been working with a hammer, I see this as like a super hammer where it's just a tool where the construction worker will still be there. They'll just be able to work faster and more efficiently.
Because they have the nail gun. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, Avery. So as we wrap it up, man, I know you have an amazing boot camp. It's called Data Career Jumpstart. We'd love to hear more about what that is and what does it entail. And people who want to break into data can learn more about it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I run a 10-week data analyst bootcamp that teaches you everything you need to know from scratch to land your first data job. So we focus on what we call the SPN method, the skills that we talked about, Tableau, SQL, and Excel. We build projects while we're learning those. So you're not like learning them and then building a project. You're actually like building a project as you're learning, which is awesome. And then we also focus on the network, things like, how do you connect with hiring managers and recruiters and those types of things. So I actually have like a quick 40-minute webinar where I'll introduce you to the SPN method, some stuff you can do on your own. And then if you want to keep learning with us, you can, and we're happy to have you. We have an awesome data fam where we go live once a week and just try to help people land data jobs as quickly as possible.
I love it. Love it. So, Avery, where can they find more about you?
Yeah, you can find more about me and my program at datacareerjumpstart.com. Or, of course, since you're already listening to a podcast, I have a podcast called the Data Career Podcast, where we actually had Daniel on just recently. So that will be available probably when you're listening to this, and other really cool people in the data field. So those are two great places to reach me.
Amazing. I mean, Avery, thank you so much. And for all of you listening, look, if you haven't already subscribed and liked the show, please do so. If you like data, want to break into data, highly encourage you to connect with Avery and visit his website. So we're going to have a link to his website as well as his LinkedIn here and his podcast as well. So if you're listening to his podcast and you like data, definitely check that out. Thank you all so much for listening, and catch you guys all in the next episode.